Hi everyone. So I just wanted to do a cool, like, semi-impromptu. I've been planning it all week, but I've also been busy and frustrating everyone with my scheduling, with all of this. But yeah, I wanted to do a conversation about Beyond the Spider-Verse. Which one's what?
Across the Spider-Verse.
Across
Beyond
the
is
Spider-Verse.
Beyond is the next one.
Next one.
I've been calling this Spider-Verse 2 the whole time.
Yeah, Spider-Verse 2. Just call it Spider-Verse 2. That makes the most sense to me. Or 2.5? No, 1.5. Because there's
1.5.
Yeah, whatever you want.
It's the first half of the second film.
Exactly. But yeah, I wanted to just like assemble my own Spider-Verse panel. So my own. I guess this is just different. You're all just different variations of me, or I'm just different variations of you. We're all the same person, right? I feel like that's fine. that's not problematic at all, I'm sure. But yeah, I wanted to get these all wonderful folks on a stream so we could talk about the queerness in Into or Spider-Verse 2, because I think there's a really interesting conversation to be had with this movie, because I've been seeing a lot of conversation that's been having discussions in isolation across identities. Like there's been this discussion going on around spider-gwen, or Spider-Woman, I guess is technically her official superhero name, where it's like she can be read as trans for X, Y, and Z reasons. We can get into some of the specifics as we talk. But then also, and this is something that Feek on your channel, you already spearheaded the other day, and having a really excellent conversation about like race in the film and how that sort of interacts with like Miles both as a biracial and a black boy. And so like I feel like these have been really important conversations having in isolation to each other, and I think there's a really cool conversation about like talking about how these things all interact and how we can look at this film through the lens of queerness, not just in terms of like literal interpretation, quote unquote, in terms of like arguing about Gwen being trans, but also how that interacts with how marginalized people generally are seen as like outliers in systems, and how that allows us to comment on systemic injustice, and how that sort of interacts also with race, also Gwen being white and what that means for her as well. So I think this is just going to be a cool panel of us being able to all discuss this. But I want to go around before we start that conversation and just have everyone introduce themselves in case folks in the chat don't know anyone here. And hopefully Feek's still here. I don't know where he disappeared, but hopefully he's still here. And we'll
we're fighting about cookies, but I'm here.
Give me some, yo. Give me some cookies.
Yeah, can I get cookies? Let's just stop this
I like
until we get
cookies.
Yeah.
Completely derailed it. Anyways, why don't we all go around? We'll end with Feet because he's having his cookie fight right now. And we'll go around. Why don't we start with Aronok? We'll have you introduce yourself first.
Hey, I'm Aronok. Most of you, because we're on Jessie's channel, probably mostly know me as Jessie's like co-writer and creative partner. We're doing some cool stuff very soon.
Yeah.
You can also find my video essays over on my channel, and my credits in like half the video essays you see on this platform.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm one half of the people that make things function.
We're basically
the other
the
half
same
being
person.
Bellamy, go.
Basically the same person.
My name is Hobie. My name is Hobie. My name is Bellamy. My name is Bellamy. You'll find me on YouTube as Bellamy Raya, but that's going to be changing really soon here as I start recording and releasing things. Like Aronok, I do a lot of things that you all don't see, won't see, and will never see. But my fingerprints are on things that you watched. A lot of the things that you've watched.
Pretty much everything. Like Bellamy, you're like the glue that holds half of like people's channels together. I definitely could speak from personal experience. So yes, you are amazing.
Thank you.
Turb, you want to go up next?
Can I do it like the Spider-Verse intros?
Yes, please. In fact, I would be offended if you didn't.
Hey, I'm Turb. I'm the pink-haired dude that gets into existential crises about his own existence on a week-to-week basis. We were on TikTok 8 times, got deleted every time we hit 100K, found fic, a lot of other creators, made some bangers, anti-parliament, anti-police, anti-hegemony, anti-shark, pink hair, and a talking flamingo. That's me.
Getting deleted from TikTok feels like it's. I feel like that's a badge of honor. Yeah.
Mhm.
And Feek, you're up. Oh, you're
Can't
muted.
hear you, Feek.
You're muted.
I'm FD Signifier. I didn't prepare a cool Spider-Verse related intro. I am extremely tired and I have way more stuff to do. But I'm about to perk it up. I might have to stew me some coffee in the middle of the conversation.
Fair.
I just hit 500K today.
Yes,
this morning.
congratulations.
Yay.
Hell
All right,
yeah,
everybody
well
else does.
deserved.
Fucking
Everybody else
awesome
does.
and
Absolutely
well
well
earned.
Thank you. Yeah, and I love this movie, and I'm gonna see it again probably tomorrow
Yeah, that's my plan to see it.
because I
this
accidentally
week.
bought 2 tickets. So
Yeah.
Watched it again today.
what a sad mistake.
How dare you? Oh no, supporting good films. Well, why don't we go around? I think the best place to start is just sort of like everyone's initial like thoughts on the movie, and then we can like start talking about queerness in the film and as it relates to like everybody. We were starting already. I had to like stop us a few times before we got started to head off the conversation. So why don't we? I'll sort of like see where the conversation goes, but why don't we start with like why don't we toss it to Bellamy? Do you want to start off like your first thoughts on the films?
I mean, I'm probably going to be in agreement with literally everyone here that it's a really good movie. I really enjoyed that, like, there was no characters that I was confused about why they did stuff. Like, everybody had a reason. Everybody had, like, they made choices that were in line with, you know, their backstories and, you know, whatever else that's going on. Like, nobody did anything that made me go, like, what the fuck? Like, why would you even do that? So all in all, I mean, like, I have criticisms of the movie, and that's gonna be true of literally everything. But all in all, I think the writing and the animation, everything else is just really. It's clear to me that there's a diverse group of people behind the scenes. That's what's clear.
Yeah.
Giving input. Yeah. Anna?
Yeah, I think my opinion's very similar to Bellamy. I have some criticisms, but like that's all media. I think my struggle with this film is I don't think that I can give it a judgment because it is half a film. It's very strongly half a film. It's like trying to watch Matrix Reloaded without watching Revolutions and then trying to judge it as like a singular entity and not like the half a film it was written to be. And the writers very clearly have stated that like they wrote it as one thing. It's just split up because of the length. So it's a lot of like really brilliant first halves of character arcs. It's well developing, you know, all of these characters that we didn't see in the first film, and then we're going to bring back the characters in the first film and kind of complete elements from them and complete elements from the second one and the third one. So it's I think it's a hard film to judge as a complete work of art because it's incomplete, but on a technical level and I think on a writing skill and like execution level, it's very, very well handled. The performances are phenomenal. As an animator, like and as a computer scientist, the technical skill and execution that they are working on, and the fact that it's not just there to be like, oh, we did something flashy with the tech. It's very much this serves the story, whether it's you know, Hobie's presence literally disrupting every scene he's in physically by having him work on different frame rates than everybody else, and his different parts of him move on different frames. So he's animated on 3s and 2s. I think his clothes are on 3s and his body's on 2s. Yeah. So you get this like sort of almost jazz beat feel to how he moves.
What I love about him, and because it'll kind of go where we're talking about, is like he's literally disruptive to the animation style of everyone else, and like everyone else is sort of like disruptive to their own animation style when they go into other universes, and I kind of really like that because it kind of goes to what we're going to be talking about in just a second, which is like how these these characters in and of themselves are disruptive of the very systems that the world is sort of set up for them, and saying you need to exist this way to be able to exist in this world, and yet these characters actually just go and it's like, no, I'm going to be my full self in this world, and you all can just deal with it, right down to the animation style. I think that really works very well. And we'll get into that in just a second, but I also want to give Turb and Feek a quick chance to say their piece before we go into the nitty gritty.
Let me go before Turb, just in case I have to handle another cookie battle.
Get more cookies, Steve. There's more cookies.
Yeah,
it's intense. I love the movie. It's probably going on like a top list. Some lists somewhere in my head it's going in there, and I haven't figured out where yet. I love how me, Turb, a bunch of other folks got together and really just talked about how like subversively black the movie is. Without it's a type of blackness that can only be done out in the open. Like I know Bellamy and like they get what I'm saying. Like there's a blackness you can only do out in the open. You can only do it out in the open and like in cold. And so like when you see that in a movie that's for everybody, it'd be different if this was like something from insert Spike Lee or whatever. But this was like, no, this is wide pop culture, the big tentpole movie. But also here's all this explicitly black subtext and like not even subtext, like
text,
text. I don't know.
I'd say it's like the film's text is black and its subtext is queer. Like I was
just the way you describing that just instantly. And Turb, I want to make sure I have you have a chance, but just because I'm reacting to you saying that about like, because my feeling too is like there's a lot of levels too where there is a subtextual queerness that this film is also drawing upon, because especially with trans folks right now, we can, and even in big budget productions like this, you can't even be explicitly like gay or lesbian or bisexual. They're still coded, but there's like a drawing upon the history of queerness in media of like down to.
I have a thing about this, so why don't we go to Turb first? But there's some history that's like really relevant to how this film. The first shot of this film does something very, very specific, and it's queer coded as a commentary on comics. Like it's, I wouldn't even argue that it's necessarily queer coded as a like we need to avoid censorship type thing. I think it's actually like commentary. Yeah. Anyway.
No, but that's exactly what I was saying. Is like there's a level of this movie being kind of going off of what Fika was saying. This movie being very self-aware of the ways in which it sits even within the Hollywood system, and how it's using the way that movies are made in order to like kind of comment both subtextually and textually about that. From my perspective as a queer person seeing that. And it's just interesting hearing you Feek talk about like the way that this movie depicts blackness also having a very similar vibe to it, which is interesting to me. But I'll end there for now and let Turb, you can
jump to Turb, who's on my right. I don't know if he's actually this way on the screen.
To my,
he's down there.
Yeah, he's this way for me.
I'm below you, I think.
Turb, you're breaking the system. It's
I'm Miles. But
you weren't supposed to be here.
I mean, you are like low key, kind of low key.
Yeah. But like I really like how the story delves into Black lives as not a monolith, because a lot of stories get it wrong and center blackness as in like stereotypes and seeing like these individual characters actually have individualized traits, but then have to move through the systems with their blackness and have to contend on how on like what to do with it. It's very refreshing, right? Because for a lot of Black young boys, a lot of Black young girls, we don't get movies like that, right? We don't get movies about that experience of growing up and learning how to, I guess, be Black in the world in different ways, like different people do it in the anti-establishment way with like Hobie, in like more so it's always in like the respectability politics is the best way to do it. But Miles breaks the whole fucking thing down, right? Miles is like, no one's going to determine my destiny. I'm going to do what I do. And it's true that Miles is like an anomaly and he has opportunities that everyone around him kind of doesn't have and more limited towards. But then it strikes the question of like, does he deserve those opportunities, or does he like, should he relinquish them? But he always chooses to just keep going and be himself, and that's something that a lot of people can relate to, because like here, like as YouTubers, we're all anomalies, right? Like getting found in the algorithm, getting this much subscribers, getting a certain amount of pay from a creator side to I I guess, budget your living expense is an anomaly in itself. And I felt that too. And I've had to contend with the fact of like, everyone around me is disenfranchised, but I'm the anomaly of wealth. What do I do? Should I like just give all my money away? Should I it's a very touching film to that aspect.
And
we've had a lot of long conversations, Turb and I, about elements of that survivor's guilt stuff. And
I feel it too, because there's a lot of elements too where it's like I want to be able to pass on like what I've gotten, but also knowing that there's only so much I can give and having to like constantly walk that line. It's an interesting thing. Well, let's start like interrogating this, and I'm just gonna quick state my thesis, and then we'll go into like some of the nitty gritty of it, so like people can like react to it, because I know people have so many thoughts. But like the reason, and I said this earlier, the reason that I really wanted to like assemble this panel specifically to like talk about this, because I know all of you will have like varying different perspectives on it, and I think it'll be really cool, is like for me, this movie just has a really good commentary using like queerness, and another way to say queerness is like othered or marginalized perspectives, is like a centered viewpoint about how every character in this movie in some way is like saying, this is who I am and I'm going to be this way no matter what, and then them having to come up against the structural issues that the system constantly places in front of them to like deny that to them. And using queerness is probably one of the like, for me, one of the like leading ways to code it is something we were talking about off stream. Like for example, like Miles has this whole thing, and it's kind of baked into superhero stories generally, but like it's specifically how this movie discusses it, about like these things that he's keeping from his parents that he has to like hide from them, and them trying to figure it out but not understanding. And I literally thought the movie was going to have like a gag, and I'm glad that they didn't, but like the gag being like, oh, his mother thinking that he's gay, and she's like, where there's like a coming out scene that Miles has, where I'm like, oh, I thought she's like, are you gay? And they don't do that, but it's played very straight and sincerely. And both in Gwen having that as well, and paralleling that in terms of like them having to like self-actualize in these systems that don't want them to self-actualize, and that being commentated on in both the Hollywood system that the film sits within, as well as like this idea of canon, as well, like Spider-Verse canon, so commentary on comics as well, but I'm placing that all in a queerness mode, but then also how different people's identities sort of have them interact with, like, I think there's something to be said, and again, I'll get into nitty gritty, and I want Aronok, I know you're itching to say some stuff about the opening of the film. I mean, like how race also plays into that with Miles being biracial, but also I think like Gwen being an interesting, like from my perspective that I can speak on, is like Gwen being white, and how she ultimately like goes from like one system to another, and like tries to like uphold it, but also being a victim of it, but then also starting to understand through her interactions with other marginalized folks, like coming to realize how this system is a problem, and her being transcoded, as well as like her sort of also like coming to that realization about how she is an anomaly in this system as well. And so like these interesting intersections about how the film like codes race and queerness in like really in like complex ways. So Aronok, I know you're itching to say something about the opening film, and then we'll keep the conversation going. So
both the first and second Spider-Verse films start with the shot approved by the Comics Code Authority. And a lot of people don't know what the Comics Code Authority is, but it's basically the Hays Code for comics. It was specifically created due to a moral panic about queerness in comics, because Batman was read as queer. So because of the Comics Code Authority, there became a lot of queer coding in comics, which just became sort of tropes that all comic characters have. All superheroes can be read through a queer lens. Often it's not a great reading. I can explain why Sam Raimi's films are, if you read it from a queer lens, or about why you should go through conversion therapy. Like that's the plot of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films, especially the third one, where like Peter's, you know, having this thing that's tempting him with true elements of his personality, and he has these like desires that he's not allowed to have because he's supposed to be a good Christian man that marries a person that has a traditional. So yeah,
stand Venom here.
Yeah, so like Venom as a queer character, like is sort of like a extrematization of that level of like queer coding of Spider-Man, and there's lots of stuff. But so Spider-Man in particular is a character that has probably had some of the most heavy queer coding out of almost any superhero, other than like the X-Men. Really, there's a long history of it. It's complicated, but yes, the film starts with the Comics Code Authority thing. And I think that, you know, both of these films are so heavily commenting on canonicity and breaking that, and breaking the rules of what's allowed to be said. And frankly, I think that the third film will probably start with it literally damaging or breaking or someone spray painting not approved, like on that Comics Code Authority thing. And if they're smart and they want to use the visuals they've set up, because there's no reason to put in approved by the Comics Code Authority other than as a little cameo thing, unless you want to actually say something really meaningful, which the films have perfectly set themselves up to say. So there's that entire history. The other thing is that the film actually does have multiple spider characters that are canonically queer, and I specifically want to touch on Sun Spider, because I feel like a lot of people don't know this character, but Sun Spider has EDS, which is a very similar chronic illness to what I have. So it's important to note, we will probably talk about this a lot, that the younger generation of marginalized superheroes are the ones that keep, like, the more pushed away from the systems of power they are, the more likely they are to help Miles, right? And Sun Spider during that chase scene is basically just saying, hey, I'm a big fan of yours, and then doesn't try to catch him.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And Sun Spider is a queer disabled woman. Like, that's relevant to that moment, and I feel like it's something that, like, I have not seen a single person comment on that character's inclusion or purpose in that scene, but it's backing up the stuff with Spider-Bite and Hobie, who both instantly see what's going on and are like, no, we're here for Miles. And that gets to, I guess, Gwen's failures. Anyway.
So the first thing I want to check in, so I when I saw that Hays Code, because I know, I'm sorry, the Comic Authority, yeah, I thought, I know of it to be something similar as to what Aronach just described it as. And I thought to myself, I don't remember ever seeing that at the beginning of any Marvel or like comic movies.
There's one film that did it. Lego Batman does it, and then Lego Batman's entire premise is queer coding. Batman and Joker have an entire love story. The entire film is commenting on queer coding. I actually have like a half-finished script on this that I'm literally, I shelved it like a while back, but I was like, oh, I'm gonna come back to it really soon. And then Across the Spider-Verse, like 2 released, and I'm like, I can't talk about this until the 3rd Spider-Verse film releases.
I don't remember. Or didn't the same directors do the Lego movies? They didn't do.
They did the Lego
they didn't do
movie.
Batman, but they did Lego movie.
They were involved with Lego Batman in some level, I think, but they weren't primary creators. I think they were like executive producers or something.
It was actually a 14-year-old that did that Lego scene
in
which
this
was
movie.
wild.
That I didn't know. Yeah.
In this movie, we're talking about
contributed to that scene.
Still. Sorry. Yeah. Contributed.
It's still impressive, but I don't want people getting the wrong like.
So yeah, so I so that makes I just wanted to amplify that take as dope, because I thought about how like I didn't get why that was there, and now it makes so much more sense now, because I thought to myself, why is this here?
I so hope they follow up on it.
Well, you know, half of my conversation, I talked to Skip Intro today, who's also a Nebula folk, and we focus more on propaganda and like how the movie handles propaganda. And we came to the conclusion that either it's the best propaganda ever or the worst propaganda ever. That makes sense, because it's leaving us in limbo, so we don't know where it's going to land. But it could either land on like the first broad effective critique of policing, or it could like pull us in just to like have Hobie save a police officer and become the mayor.
Yeah. It's one of those, especially when like
I need to talk about something. With that. So Hobie, you only know this if you know some like obscure punk shit from the 70s, especially British punk stuff, and it's really relevant to Hobie because Hobie's a British punk. Hobie has 2 sets of shoelaces. One of them is blue. A blue shoelace means you killed a cop. When Miles brings up, hey, your police captain died, Hobie responds very nonchalantly with zero remorse, zero sadness, anything.
So what of it?
So what of it?
Yeah.
He fucking killed his captain. I'm just so I want to point out that this film, it didn't textually do it, but I don't think they can textually do it. And I think again, these films are kind of commenting on what they can and can't say, right? But this film textually has a hero kill a cop, and the solution.
Oh no, we lost Bellamy.
We lost Bellamy. The solution to Gwen's dad being a cop is him quitting. That's the solution. The film says that is the hero moment for Gwen's dad.
Yeah. That was I did like that.
If they follow up, this is the problem. I can't judge this film until the second half comes out. As you're saying, it's like it can either land perfectly or it's gonna trash fire, like dumpster fire crash.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to like see where it's ultimately go, but especially with like
and to add on.
Oh no, Chirp, you go. I was about to set up for you. You're good.
Okay, I was gonna say, and to add on to that, in the systems of anomalies and like canon events that are supposed to happen, Hobby doesn't care that police are dying, right? Hobby doesn't give a fuck. Hobby's like, Hobby loves canon event. Like he's against everything else, right? But he's like, police dying, word, whatever, right? He doesn't. Yeah. But Miles does, because Miles is a different person than Hobby. Although they're both being subjected to the same systems of racism, Miles is a different person than Hobby. So Hobby's like, so Miles is like, that's my dad, right? But it's also been a whole thing since the first movie that the dad is using I guess a kind of a
lump and pro.
Yeah. Like hard parenting towards like bringing Miles to a certain place, right? Like pulling Miles to this place, like, you have to do the charter school, shut up, like, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. And while Miles like constantly rejects that, he still loves his dad, not as like a cop, but he loves him as like a person. And that's a thing that I don't know how they're going to like settle, in the movie. They might like just lean into it and say like Miles saves his dad, but then that would like subvert like a lot of themes of the movies and like canon of it, and destroying establishment, so I don't know. I don't know how they're gonna do that.
Yeah, I mean the way that it reads to me, and again, it's hard to judge it based on it being half a movie, but to like comment on it for me, and I'm curious to see how people are gonna react to this, is like how it constantly comes back to these ideas of systems that these characters have to like live within and live up to, but then are ultimately never allowed to be their full selves and judged for. So we have this, and it's done in multiple ways, like done one through like the literal animation like we talked about, done two, I think interestingly, through like a commentary on comic books and how like characters like this, like queer characters, women characters, black characters were like always marginalized in this, right down to like being like comics code authority. Like there's this whole thing about like with like the way that Miguel talks about like these expectations of like the Spider-Man story as like canon, and how like, oh, these are the beats that you have to hit to be legitimately a Spider-Man character. But then also that like feels like it's an interesting commentary about like how fanboys also talk about like Miles and women characters being in both comics and movies, about like, oh, whenever there's a black character that comes, like, you can't have a black Spider-Man, you can't have a woman Spider-Man, this is ridiculous, and these constant judgments and expectations by the audience, by the systems that they're in. And I love that this is kind of explicitly called out, like through a context of, oh no, we lost Bellamy again.
I think Bellamy's having some computer issues.
We'll get her.
They said their laptops crashing in and out, so
we'll get them as they come. But
but
just a quick finish off this note, that I'm like, it was interesting to me to see Miles's mom be like the one to sort of like bring this up, in a sense that like, never let anybody tell you that you don't deserve to be there. There's that like the whole speech that she gives, which I think is like, definitely when I was reading it, and this is something that I can't speak to as well, but like I related to that as like a queer person who often feels like I don't live up to a certain space. But I also know that there's a racial context to that as well, that I think is like interesting, and like oh, please take it.
They're both very relevant, though. One of the things that's been integral to like the development of my politics was essentially intersectionality, but explicitly like engaging with queer theory, queer
readings and
readings, etc. Because it illuminated so much about why blackness works the way it does within a Western society, because blackness is inherently queer, not inherently LGBTQ or inherently sexual in terms of its queerness, but in fact, in that it does not fit into the framework as it's designed, and so it's meant to be outside of it. And that conversation, and it's so dope how you can read it in multiple levels and it all still remains true. Dope specifically like that the writers like perfectly thread that needle. That talk that Miles's mom is it Rita?
Mm-hmm. I think
talk
so, yeah. I'll double check. You keep going. I'll double check her name on here.
But
the talk that she gives her son is greatly a universal conversation that black mothers or black elders will give to black children. And from a black mom to a black boy, it does take on a kind of lore-based significance, because that is the most, that particular conversation and relationship takes on a lot of different dynamics because of the nature of gender and blackness, and how that manifests over time. So there's so many things there. While still, and it makes sense that it still reads as queer, because the conversation is the same. I've raised you this long. I've raised this long to send you out into a world that is openly hostile towards you. So you have to take care as you do that, and you have to hold on to yourself in the process. And just go ahead, Aaron.
And then, Aaronak, I want to let you.
I've had like bang on that same conversation that Rio has with Miles. That is the conversation my mom has had with me. Like, before,
I think it's an interesting thing too, with like two things that I want to say. One part of the thing that I wanted to toss this to Bellamy, so hopefully get them back. But also like Miles being biracial as well, and so kind of also sitting in this liminal space between two different cultures as a kid, as well, and sort of like that aspect of like being in between. And then yes, this is another thing too that I think where reading Gwen as trans is interesting, because something that I like experienced coming out as a trans person is like having to learn all of these things as a trans woman after the fact. Because when I grew up, like, I was just seen as a white dude, and so I was sort of seen like going into these spaces was safe for me to be in generally any space. But then as I started to be read more and more as a woman in spaces, like being out at night then became a very scary prospect for me. And it took me a while to realize that I think there was one night I was literally like, I had a dog at the time, I was walking my dog, and I just realized like, oh, I don't feel safe right now. And it was the first time that I like had that realization, but it was something that I had to come to like understand, having like seen how society perceives me differently, despite me not being perceived that way. That like I think a lot of other people, especially in like being a woman, but also being a black person or something like that, is something that you're taught much younger and have to learn much younger out of safety. And then also too, that kind of interestingly reacts to like Gwen is a character. For me, to see her go from like having to experience that situation with her dad and be rejected by her dad, and I was very much like, as I was watching the movie, I love that this movie is starting off with like,
I'm like, I can't believe I'm crying this early in the movie.
Yeah.
Like, why y'all do this already? What are y'all doing?
And then she goes to another system that she's like, oh, I'll try and fit in this system and this will work. And for me, that like, I don't think this is exactly what the movie's doing, but for me, it like read to me like being like, oh, masculinity doesn't fit. I'm feeling rejected personally there. Oh, I'll sort of fit in more as like being perceived as like this system of a woman. But even that, like me being pushed out of and rejected because I'm trans, and then ultimately coming to realize like, oh, I can't, like, I'm never going to fit in these systems. Whereas it's something like Miles seems to understand a little bit more inherently than it takes Gwen to get there. And Miles being more explicitly pushed out than, because Gwen's sort of like partially being accepted, partially not being accepted, and that can be related to like a race aspect as well. Whereas Miles is like instantly sort of like, you're not accepted here by someone like Miguel. And so it's sort of an interesting sort of conversation about like how like the Gwen, if we read Gwen as a trans person but also as white, like how those things interact in comparison to Miles being biracial. And which is Bellamy, I wanted to tell you. Yeah. So,
Afro-Latino, not biracial.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Yeah, that is actually it. Can I ask a quick favor?
Yeah.
Somewhat playing cis devil's advocate, but also wanting to be the benefit of you all's knowledge. All the different readings, the trans readings of Gwen, because I've seen a couple on Twitter, but like I want to get the full like download of them, especially since I know I'm going to have this conversation with other people. The way I had a moment like one of my childhood friends. Wait till y'all get older and your like cool progressive peers start to like say slick shit to you. I'm like, oh, that's not what that word means. So anyway, so like if you could kind of go through all the different like codes.
That's probably the best person.
Yeah. So I mean, one off the bat, we just have like Gwen is a character that is alienated from her relationship with the people around her, like right off the start, because she's clearly like different. She's dealing with this identity that she cannot share with the people around her, and her very heavily queer coded friends, Miles and Hobie and stuff. She can share that with them, and that is a safe place. And she hasn't had access to that when we start the film for a while. And so she's feeling very isolated. She has all this anger that she's dealing with too, which is very, very much like that thing of being in the closet, like trying to struggle with that anger and stuff. I'm actually going to talk about that in a video coming up soon. But yeah, so she's got all that. Actually, Bellamy's going to be voicing that character.
And I also spoke about in my masculinity video too. I talked about like me being angry and punching a door when I was young.
Yeah. So but so we see that, we then see her having this like falling out with her dad due to this identity that she's been hiding. We see her hiding elements of her identity like physically in her room, you know. And then we get the fight scene at the I think the Guggenheim or something like that, wherever the
modern art,
the art museum. And
the subtext, if you really listen to the subtext on your second viewing, I swear to God, they do the double speak. What Aronok said earlier, how the subtext is intrinsically queer, yes, because the whole coming out scene, there's like 8 different lines where you can interpret that as trap.
Yeah, Aronok was literally in the middle of it.
You get excited.
I was just about to
don't explain my I've already told this explanation too, but
my bad.
So Gwen has this whole fight, and she sees these older characters which she feels connection to because they are like her. They share an identity which is not shared by the people around them, is not understood by these other people in the space. So she's not alone now. She has these older mentors, but these are flawed mentors, and we're gonna get to that in a second. So Gwen has this fight. Her dad backs her to a corner, and this I think parallels, and it's important to say that this is set in New York. New York has a long history of police violence against queer people, especially queer people of color, especially homeless queer people of color and everything. So this has a lot of parallels you could see to something like police raids on gay bars, right? Where people will get outed by the cops and stuff. So Gwen has this gun aimed at her, and her only thing that she can try to do to protect herself is to come out, but it's not how she wants it, and it's not okay, and it's she doesn't get to have this moment. Like it's stripped from her, and this is a painful moment. It's very clearly played like it is when you are forcefully outed. Like that is what this moment is. So Gwen takes off her mask, and her dad doesn't back down. He actually escalates, and we see that like for Gwen, this is the capitalization of like all of her fears about expressing her identity have now been confirmed, and she doesn't know what to do. Obviously, it's fucking terrifying. Her dad's reading her fucking Miranda rights, right? And her dad is basically blaming her for killing his son. This is something that is implied because he talks about Peter as being a son. Like he lived, he ate at my table. He was like a son to me. Like that's a thing that he talks about in the film. So he is saying, I blame you and this identity for killing my son.
Yep.
And Gwen here, as the spider person of this universe, is literally replacing Peter in the story role, right?
Yeah.
So we can read this, and then she gets saved by these older mentor figures, right? With Miguel and Jess, and I think it's a good point. Just insert like I've noticed a lot of like weird vitriol towards Gwen that doesn't include like anger like Peter B. Parker and any other people that fuck over Miles. You know what I mean? Where I'm like, I feel like people are using Gwen's actual fuck-ups, which is the entire point her character exists, to discuss these flaws of people and the limits of their perspectives. And we'll get to that in a second, but just I want to like really position this. This is a 16-year-old kid that just got fucking kicked out by her dad after he aimed a gun at her, and Miguel and Jess take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a thing pointing out is that so she finds solace in this queer community, and I think the whole like crashing at Hobie's place, right? The whole crashing at Hobie's place in his universe, like crashing there.
Right.
That is a big parallel to queer kids who get kicked out, who go and crash at their friends' houses and stuff.
That's
And I
an
wanna
extremely fucking like that's an extremely trans girl thing to do. You go crash with the fucking punk because the punk is
Yeah.
cool with you. Like,
Because the
punk
punk's
will
always
protect you.
acceptable.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And I want to make
So-
sure. Sorry, Aaron. I want to make sure you finish, but I also want to make Turb. Turb also wants a chance to.
Yeah. I'm trying to like break down the entire queer reading for like us, and then I'm gonna be quiet
this
for a
is
while
it.
because I'm
'Cause
talking
this-
too much.
all I got
But-
was like there was a trans flag in the room.
Yeah.
So
No,
I'm like,
there's
nah,
a lot
I'm
of
like,
like,
no, there's more than that.
there's
But
a
her
lot of
colors,
subtext with
the
it.
colors that she's wearing gives me
Yeah.
that too. They're not.
Yeah,
they're not
she has the
literally a
trans flag
flag,
color.
but it's like
Yeah, no, they
well,
are. Like it's.
Oh,
it's
okay, 'cause
in,
color
in
white,
the
white,
scene,
so-
in the scene, in
okay.
the scene, especially where she does.
I'll get to that.
Yeah, you'll get there. Yeah.
Let me do a path.
You go.
I'll
You
lose
finish
my
up.
spot.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So Gwen, Gwen, when we see her in like civilian clothes, is often wearing baggy things that cover up the body shape as well. Like, this is a relevant thing. We see this especially when she's encountering like Miles' parents and stuff at the party. Like, she's often wearing these sort of baggier clothes. But when she's with her queer friends and feels safe, what is she wearing? A skin tight suit. Her body is something that she feels comfortable having seen in some level by those she knows that like understand her queer identity, right? And we can definitely see some parallels. You could argue between like spider outfits and elements of drag too. Like you could argue that there's pieces there. So we've got all those elements, right? We go through the entire rest of the story. Gwen realizes that like the system will never work for her, which I think is definitely a thing that like Jessie's talked about for certain, you know, for white queer people, like that whole process. And we can dig into that deeper, but like that's the parallel there for trans reading. Anyway, then we get back to her universe, and she gets to have this actual coming out with her dad after that forced outing, and the scene uses watercolor. And I think the use of watercolor as her color scheme, especially running watercolor during the coming out scene, is there's this fluidity, right? This movement of the world, like it's not solid and hard, it's changing, right? Because Gwen is defined by this element of changing identity
And also
shifting things.
Not to cut you off, just to add a quick piece. The way that Gwen's world was described to her by the directors was like a mood ring. So like emotionality is a very core part of Gwen and reading emotionality in the world, which is also, I think, a very like trans experience, especially trans women experience that we talked about, like my masculinity video about being able to like express emotions that people seen as men are told not to express, and that trans women sort of are able to do that. Anyways, back to what you were saying.
Absolutely. So so she gets to have this whole coming out scene. I have an issue with that, though. I'll talk about that in a minute. But like so she has a second coming out scene with her dad, and it actually goes better this time, right? And it's that moment where she then gets like the ability to move freely, and that gift of moving freely, right? That gift of comprehension and understanding of the universe comes from Hobie, her queer-coded friend that she's been crashing with, right? So there's so many layers to it, and I think again, it's not fully complete. I'm really curious what the second film's going to do. I really hope that I hope that Sunspider gets a larger role. I feel like it's pretty specific that they had Sunspider have like multiple lines compared to almost all the other Spider people, right? Like that. So I hope Sunspider gets more of a role next film, and same with Spider-Bite. Like I hope some of those characters get more
and
attention.
Also, one thing that I want to toss it to Turb, but just one other also thing to add to the queer reading, if you want to just add some explicit elements of it, Gwen also does have the Protect Trans Kids flag in her room, and it's like not to say that there aren't cis people that do have Protect Trans Kids flags, but like every single trans person that I know has the Protect Trans Kids.
Where's your
like,
fucking Protect Trans Kids flag?
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, and also, I think it's also worth noting she has a Protect Trans Kids flag in her room, and her dad's a cop.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
That would definitely I think put you at some level of risk, right? Like if you're a cis person of being outed. And I think again, I do want to push against one thing that I've seen people using as evidence of the transness, which is that there is a patch on her dad's jacket that in a single scene that happens to be bathed in trans colors looks like the trans flag. I think that's just them doing an extra subtle nod. That is just the American flag. It's not,
I agree.
It's not a trans flag, and I don't think we should be celebrating a trans flag being on a cop's uniform. That fucking grosses me out. That grosses me out. That kind of bothered me. I was like, I was seeing that, and I'm like,
there was that one thing. One of my friends sent me. There was like a cop car that someone had decked out in pride colors, but the way
and they wrote all something. All colors
it was
are beautiful.
They put ACAB on there. It was great. Turb, I wanted to make sure you got to say something because I know you've been looking for a chance to jump in.
Yeah. I just want to say, I want to fire back at this audience real quick.
Yeah.
Because if we're talking about the directors, and if you're talking about the writing of the subtext and how we're just connecting dots based on subtext, the director's movie said this isn't our movie. This is like the people's movie, and then welcomed us interpreting the subtext in our own different ways, right? And then heavily reinforced that there's meaning in the subtext. If you watch the interviews, the authors say that. So the fact that, and I feel like in like today's age of media literacy, I guess we haven't always been subjected to the best forms of queer or Black representation. So when we see good forms of queer and Black representation, like we immediately it seems like we shut it down for the bad one, right? It seems like, okay, this is a really progressive conversation, but we can't have progressive conversations about this because we've never seen this in the media. So I'm gonna revert to this bad one of YouTubers in 2007 that were critiquing South Park, right? I'm telling you, if you read the subtext, it makes the movie so much more better. Because the way, especially, and I also want to throw in that Spot is kind of an allegory for the readers. For the readers that are kind of looking at this right now and attacking the anomaly that is Gwen. Mm-hmm. Right? You could attack anything else because Peter B has been an op since the very beginning. Peter B didn't even want to help Miles. Peter B was so ready to leave Miles' ass in the Bronx, right? Mm-hmm. Or Brooklyn, sorry.
I think people should be mad at Gwen for what she did. She was wrong.
Yeah.
But she grew. I just think that's it's a little outside.
Yeah, but people are trying to essentialize her as the mistake without showing the growth. Anyway, sorry. You.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just find it jarring how all these other characters could have fuck ups and all of that, and we could analyze it and we could reiterate it and everything. But once the conversation goes into oh, maybe Black people were portrayed in a certain way, or maybe queer people were portrayed in a certain way, y'all get mad at that. Isn't the movie telling you not to?
Yeah.
It's the whole time. It's very ironic. It's like a fourth wall meta irony thing going on, and the discourse is sometimes very weird to see. Did you watch the movie?
And another thing that I want to say too with that, and then I want to toss to Bellamy as well. But I'll try and say this quickly. With also that thing with people trying to look for a lot of people when we talk about Gwen as a trans character, people are looking for, and it goes to what you were saying, Enoch, about the flag on his the cop's outfit looking like a trans flag for a moment. People are trained to look for signifiers of explicit signifiers of look, she is explicitly transgender, because a lot of our society today in terms of how we code queerness has been, and what we've been yearning for, I think a lot too, is explicit statements of queerness so that we can't avoid it. But what that has been done especially in our capitalist society today is people looking for this commodified queerness. So talking about Disney movies and how queerness is done in that. Look at just the one that comes immediately to mind is Black Panther. There's the two women who are lesbians in that movie, but the only time we get that explicitly referenced is at the end of the movie where they go and kiss each other on the forehead, and it's look, that's the moment. They exist as queer in that singular moment. The rest of the movie they do not act like queer people, and that is the they don't reference having a partner. They don't reference having desire. They don't live as queer people except for the one moment where they do, so that Disney
we need to click this button there and get a screen grab and say, hey, we did it.
Exactly.
But it's like what Feek was saying with the blackness of the film. Mm-hmm. It pervades the
That's what
entire element of the character.
That's what I'm
rather
saying.
Than just,
that's what I'm
one
saying.
moment.
It's like when we talk about Gwen as trans, like, yes, is there moments where I would be like, I would like a moment of her like explicitly like like maybe if like a moment that would call out to it subtly, like where you see a photo of her as a kid and she's more mass presenting, like a more confirmed way, yes. But there's an element of like, this is not a moment of consumable queerness for Gwen. Like her entire character, as you say, Arnok, is like, like her arc fits this reading of her being trans to a tree, and not just these little signifiers of like, oh, this is something like she has a trans flag, she has this, like, no, her character is stoked in that. And yes, we should get these moments where that is confirmed in a sense of like it is like not something that we have to read into the subtext of, but we are also like trying to train ourselves, and I think it's a detriment to how we read art, to look for these signifiers of like, hi, look, this is the queer moment, because that's how capitalism tries to sell you queerness. It tries to sell you the t-shirts of like, look, we put a rainbow on a thing, as opposed to actually allowing us to have our stories be told in a way that actually resonates with what it means to be queer, or it means to be a different identity. Like, I think that's what this movie does much better, in like every character's perspective. If we read them from these lines of marginalized identities, fits right down to their entire arc of their character, as opposed to just being like, hey, look, look, we have a black character here. Hey, look, we have a queer character here, and that doesn't.
It's tokenization.
Yeah, exactly.
Rainbow. Well, actually, no. Bellamy, you go ahead before I jump in on.
Oh, thank you, King of the Blacks. I
King
appreciate
of the Blacks. On my birthday in Lay, I'm gonna get a real crown and just make that into a character.
So there's stuff that I wanted to respond to from everybody that spoke, but there is a different avenue of this that I think that I want to talk about before we even get into like back and forth discussions, if that even happens. But like, one of the things that kind of like bothered me about the movie, and I think they kind of wrote themselves into a corner by making, I mean, she's a presumed love interest, but she may not be, like, depending on like what, like, you know, you're getting hints of it, but you also get hints of like, you know, she might actually be into Hobie, and Hobie might be returning that. I forget the Indian character's name, but you know, he says it. He says, "Oh well, does he know about Hobie?" You know, he's thinking in his head, which could just be him being like a teenage boy thinking that they're dating, because you know she's staying the night over where he's at. But it could also mean that he knows something that we don't too. So it depends. But if you're reading a relationship or a budding relationship between Gwen and what is his name? I am so mad about this. Miles. What the fuck is wrong with me? They kind of wrote themselves into a colorism trap, right? And they did that because, like, so Hollywood has this weird fucking thing where they act like first of all, I am an extreme minority among black folks. Compared to people like Turb and people like Feek, I am an extreme minority, right? So representation of people like me, if you're just doing percentages, shouldn't be anywhere near the percentage that it is right now, right? So interracial relationships, while they do happen, are like a very small minority. Black folks tend to date black folks. Like, that's just true, because we live around one another. Yeah, like it's an outrageous fucking percentage. Like, my mom is an outlier among all of her siblings as the only one that's been in an interracial relationship. And after she stopped dating my father, she only dated black men after that. That was it. So it's very strange to me that like Hollywood keeps doing this like interracial. It's always giving like a we can fuck the racism away. You know what I mean? And it's really fucking bothersome for me. And there's another issue that I spotted too, and I appreciate it. I really appreciated Spider-Bite being in the movie. I hope she gets a very large, or at least significantly larger, role in the next one. Because in this one, you know, she gets to be a nerdy black girl, right? And you don't really get that too often in like big movies like this, right? You don't really see nerdy black girls doing nerdy black girl shit.
Bi-coded nerdy black girl too.
Bi-coded girl. She's
very bi-coded. Like,
she's
there's
extremely
so much queer coding going on. Like, her entire outfit's literally just
yeah.
It's literally by lighting.
But
literally lighting. Like,
I got more I want to add on too.
Yeah, go ahead. But also just
like So I have a lot of smoke for Gwen, and I have a lot of smoke for Gwen because not just because of like when I say for Gwen, it's for the writing of Gwen, I should say. because from the beginning, and I don't know if this is biased or this is intentional, but from the beginning, she's treating all of the black people around her as tools for growth. And you see it when she talks to Spider-Woman, the Black Spider-Woman. And I actually have a problem. Yeah, and she says, will you adopt me? And that kind of pissed me off, like, from the beginning. It didn't really, like, piss me off. You know, it's one of those... Everybody here
rubs you the wrong way.
You're like, all right,
we know what you mean. We know what you mean.
And I put it back here for a little bit and enjoy the movie, but there's a thing back here that's
I 100% agree with that reading of the writing of Gwen being an issue.
But it's not only that, though. But it's not only that, right? Because they wrote themselves into this trap because they made Spider-Woman, like Black Spider-Woman, a mother, and that's. And she is the only mature black woman that is in the movie, right? Because Spider-Bite reads like a teenager. Most of them read like teenagers, right? And
Rio's Afro-Latina.
Yeah, Rio's Afro-Latina, and she's a fucking mother, and she's doing, you know, like, and it bothered me because these are the unambiguous black people that we have in the movie, and this is one of two unambiguous black women that we have in the movie, and she's immediately a mother. And she doesn't get to be anything else. She's only a caretaker. She doesn't get to be. She's only Miguel's, you know, backup. She's only, you know, Gwen's potential mother, Gwen's mentor. She's only actually a mother, you know, because she's literally fucking pregnant. And that I found really bothersome because when you're writing stuff like that, when you're writing black women like that, you end up trapping yourself in other loops. And I mean, this is true just for any marginalizations. That's one of the things that really bothered me, like, about the writing. It doesn't, like, make the movie bad by any means, but that bothered me a lot. And it's a weird juxtaposition for me because they're doing it accidentally or they did it on purpose. Miguel is a white Latino, right? Now he's Mexican. He's like Mexican and white or something, right? But when I was watching, I'm like, this man is Cuban or he's Argentinian.
I'll look it up while you talk.
Right? Yeah. Because that's him being a fascist like that is a very white Latino thing to do. Is an extremely white Latino thing to do. You go to Colombia, you go to Argentina.
Important note. I don't think the film directly states this. It's very heavily nodded towards, but Miguel O'Hara is like Elon Musk. Like, he's like a rich billionaire that owns a giant company. He runs Alchemax.
It says he is. I don't know about the version in the movie, but just to read his quick brief history online, he is Irish and Mexican descent.
So, and then you have him being a fucking fascist, right? And then you have Miles, who's Afro-Latino. So they're clearly thinking about colorism in that way. To me, they're clearly thinking about colorism in that way. And it's very odd that they applied colorism, or they looked through a lens of colorism for the men, but they didn't do it for the women.
Yeah.
Well, but that also would be par for the course for black.
Yeah, I mean, par for the fucking course. I mean, it's the same fucking thing, right?
In mainstream media.
It would be interesting to see.
I don't think that's a hot take at all.
Okay.
I do think it is definitely an issue that the only two older black women that we see really is Rio, who's a mom.
Well, Rio's a mom. I don't know if we're reading Rio. I mean,
I think
Afro-Latina. You could read her Afro-Latina, and I think you'd be okay. But you could also just read her as just a Puerto Rican woman, and I think you'd be okay either way.
I'm not sure. I know a lot of people on the panel the other day were reading her as Afro-Latina, so I wanted to.
What's his name? Bill was, but that's also because Bill's mother
is also Afro-Latina.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jessie.
I was just going to mention, just to add like an interesting complicating factor too with Mexico, because I did not know that with Miguel being Mexican Irish, and we were also talking a lot about like propaganda in the film, and I might uphold it, might not uphold it, but also with like the Irish relationship in America with being cops as well. And like assimilating through joining the police force.
They literally said that there's a line in there. There's literally a line in there. There's a cop you hear. He's like, "I'm an Irish cop." Literally,
that's
right. Yeah, because like, I mean, Turb and I talked about this bit in our first Jubilee video, but like, yeah, that whole process of taking certain groups and pitting them in a power position over other marginalized groups, or putting them in the position of
Well, that's
in the group.
The Irish. Hang on, Terry. The Irish are cops is not what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, we're
It's
saying that
Specifically
there
in
are
the
Irish
United
people.
States. Yeah, specifically in the United States,
Yeah,
it is a known thing for Irish folks who are
we are
looking to
talking
assimilate to
about-
become cops.
Yes.
is what
So you're
it is.
talking about American Irish people,
Yeah,
And
and
not
to an
Irish
extent
Irish.
Canadian Irish people as well.
Yes.
As an Irish Canadian, like that's a thing.
Yes. Just so everyone in the chat knows.
None
that.
of
like
my
a similar
family is a
lad,
cop,
similar
but
lad.
like,
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah,
lads
it
don't
does
actually like
happen.
cops. If you go to Ireland, a lot
oh
of
yeah,
lads
no,
are
Ireland.
cops.
If you go to actual Ireland, no, fuck cops. Like Ireland,
Yeah,
Irish
yeah.
people hate cops.
Yes.
Mhm.
And
We were
that's definitely
actually,
something that I learned from like my family. Like that's something there's elements of like our Irishness that's like definitely been maintained a lot more than other people here.
Yeah. Well, I was on Mark's stream earlier, and they were having a very interesting conversation about Irish people in Florida. And we were talking about anomalies, kind of, and we were talking about the anomalies of like chance that people are given,
Mhm.
and specifically, when you go to what's really hard about making a movie like this is making opportunity seem like scarce and give it on a whim, right? Because like when you if you have a conversation, okay, let me like bring this all back to ground one.
Hell
So
yeah.
let's say you have a conversation with like your black cousin who's very successful, or if you have like a queer cousin who's very successful, and you say, well, black people have limited avenues to get to the success you're at, they might get really mad at you, right? Because you're undermining their struggles in the system, right? And you're kind of pseudo reaffirming some of the racism they also felt, like going through that system and coming out to that advantageous position, right? But the truth is, like, and having the conversations with like, I was given an opportunity, but this opportunity only happens to 99.9999% of people. It is very hard in the realms of like black people, because a lot of white authors do it in a sense of like pulling yourself out from your bootstraps and shit like that, right? Which we understand doesn't work. So for them to do it through like an anomaly in another universe, and like a whole thing of like a spider came in through a how did a spider come in through a right?
I
And then gets into a backpack and then comes down from the ceiling, bites Miles notices it, and he's like
Well, yeah, so it's blaming
right?
Miles.
Like,
it's blaming Miles for things
yeah.
that were like outside of his control, and then saying you should have like you like if he succeeds, it's because like it's in spite of his circumstances, and if he fails, it's because of them, and not like recognizing these systems that he has to like work within. It's always like individualizing these issues. Yeah. I
want to read some stuff that Turb and I were saying to each other in my private Discord. We were talking about this topic, and there's a shot in the first film where Miles, the color behind Miles as he's having spider sense with Spider-Man, shifts from the colors of Prowler to the colors of Spider-Man. This is the moment where like Miles has made a choice because he now has an opportunity that he didn't have before, and
also,
so this is
why evil Miles has braids and good Miles has a fucking afro.
He's not evil Miles though. That's the
Yeah.
point. We're gonna get to that. But it's
Okay,
not evil Miles. Like I think that's an important thing to remember, is that Aaron wasn't evil, right? Like Aaron's someone who did crime. Uncle Aaron,
Uncle Aaron. Prowler.
Yeah, Prowler.
And
Uncle Aaron wasn't
Miles.
evil. Like that was pretty explicit in the first film. Uncle Aaron wasn't evil. Uncle Aaron did shit because he needed to because of circumstance, right?
Right.
So Turb said, in terms, this is Turb's words, then I'll read my words after. But Turb said, in terms of system,
just to back up like that point real quick, like Kingpin immediately killed the Prowler when the Prowler stepped out of line, right? Kingpin had shit on the Prowler.
Yeah,
like I feel like.
No, well, it's also like it's very clear too. Like Prowler being read as like the villain of that movie is how some people misinterpreted that without recognizing like the importance of Prowler to Miles' story, and then also like Kingpin being the rich dude who creates and also takes advantage of these circumstances by pitting people against each other, even with.
Well, and also when we talk about parallels, right? Uncle Aaron is Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben is the moral compass of Peter. Therefore, Aaron is the moral compass of Miles to some degree within that reading, right? So Aaron is not evil. Like that's really important, I think, to understanding the character. I think you can read him as that.
Like Aaron does not get the chance to be as seen as what's the right way to say it? To like be like Uncle Aaron would not have the same ability to be read as morally pure as Uncle Ben was, but is also still that for Miles in their relationship.
One thing I do want to say though, and I don't know, Bellamy, you back me up because I think this is where you might have been going, is that Miles. Evil Miles, we call him 42 Miles. Him with his hair braided.
Public school Miles. That's what that is.
Public school Miles. Yeah. Him with his hair braided is still significant because that's a signifier, no pun intended, to the audience and like to like
exactly.
You know, general population that he is not invested in presenting a certain way to society.
Yes, exactly.
As a young black man.
And to compound that point, it's not an accident to me that the father figure for public school Miles is a nigga that's willing to do what he need to do to get bread. You saw because he broke off Rio before it was time to go upstairs, right?
That was a very
but good Miles, right? Charter school Miles. His dad is a cop. Now you know for a fact. Now I can't prove this, but I know for a fact that charter school Miles tried to braid his hair and his dad told him not to do that shit.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I want to throw in another layer. Hobie has wicks, which is a very specific style of hair that has a long history of being viewed as particularly like untidy or whatever, which it isn't, but that's how people view it, and also has connections to punk history and stuff. So again, like that thing of clothing, hairstyle, presentation of
No, he's not evil. It's just the word I'm using. I'm taking the framing that was given to me when I say that.
Yeah,
that's
valid. I think of him as just Prowler Miles or 42 Miles. I think it's like the I want to read the stuff that Turb said yesterday because it was smart, and I want to give Turb props for it. Which
I just said a quick story, one little silly story before like we get into some in-depth stuff. I tried what Bellamy said, and I tried to clock like a white girl, and I went on a date with the white girl, and then she asked me like why my hair looks like that and why how my parents allow myself to look like that, and I never talked. I'm telling you like here, man, like here, like it's keep going though, keep going.
So Turb said because we were talking about the like color lighting thing and like what does it say about fate and stuff, and Turb said in terms of systems and white supremacist layering within the Spider-Verse, the story is blatantly stating Miles is an anomaly because of the variety of choices he has as a black boy, and the alternate Prowler could have been him if his options were limited. I don't know about his fate change because fate is very loosely defined by actions within the system with Spider-Man. More so like he could have been the Prowler if his options were more limited given his situation. And then I said, that's more what I meant. I think the films are using fate as like a metaphor for circumstance and position. Like they swapped positions because something that would have given Miles of 42 Earth the ability to make certain choices was removed and given to the Miles we know. But the issue isn't Miles took his position. The issue is why the fuck is anyone systemically disadvantaged / fated to be something, especially within the larger themes of choice, which is why it's Spider 42, just like the lottery ball being 42. It's saying the lottery is bullshit. It's saying the universe dictating your fate is bullshit. Actually, it is systems that exist and can be fought that are placing you in that position. And this gets to like I think that Miguel and Jefferson Davis are purposefully paralleled in certain elements. They're both working from like a punishment mindset, right? And that just doesn't work. Whereas like we see with like Rio's parenting, right? The thing that actually helps Miles is like giving him the support and love that he needs and the space to find himself, you know. And I think we see that again with like Hobie kind of parallels that as well. He's giving Miles the space to take actions. He's not coming to swoop in and save Miles. He's just giving Miles the tools to like make his own decisions and make his own freedom. And both Miguel and Jefferson literally ground Miles in a way that would prevent him from moving between universes, right? Like that's they're both saying like you can't leave here, you have to exist here because you've done something wrong and need to be punished for that. Whereas Rio and Hobie and stuff are like, no, I'm gonna understand why you're doing what you're doing, and then I'm gonna give you the support that you need. And I think there's so many parallels like that, and that are interesting, but I think the most interesting parallel that I feel like hasn't been brought up a ton is that Spot is a mirroring of Miles, but like from the reverse position. So Spot is someone that had all the privilege, right? Rich white dude, like go to Harvard, tech expert, right? And his entire thing is he feels so entitled to that privilege, and the instant it got stripped, because systems are fucking unfair, it doesn't matter even if you have all the privileges, you can still have it stripped. His whole thing is, I should get taken seriously. Why am I not taken seriously?
Let me destroy the universe.
Let me destroy the universe.
I also love that they
imploding, and his whole thing is literally like he's almost an embodiment of extreme nihilism and cynicism. Like his solution, he's a 4chaner. His solution is like, oh, I have a hole in my chest. I need more. That's how I'm going to solve my emptiness, is making myself more empty. Literally, he says that in the film, like directly. Whereas Miles, also, everybody's saying, you know, like, you're not important, whatever. But Miles doesn't feel this, like, entitlement, doesn't feel this rage at that. He's just like, no, I just am. I am good. I am worthy. Like, that's
he does, but I'm going to let Jessie jump in real quick.
I'm going to quiet because I'm talking too much.
No, please. I was just gonna quick say, because mine just I've been more enjoying the conversation. I was just gonna mention I also really like that Spot is like recontextualized as like the guy who got the bagel thrown on him in the first movie as just like a background character, and he sort of creates this whole thing of like, I need to be centralized, I need to be the central bit, but like he's just a background player in this other movie about other people, and he just sort of has this like nihil.
Can't stand it.
Exactly, he can't stand that he is not the protagonist, and like the whole first half of the movie is like Miles even literally been like, hey, he's a whatever, like a villain of the week or whatever, and so it just like discounting him, and that's what angers him to like constantly want to like be sent, just like, no, I'm your antagonist. Like, no, you're not. You're just this weird dude who I just have to deal with, and this constant like just void of emptiness that he constantly creates. Now is like not even making himself the main villain, because like there's not even these good like strong like connections that he has to Miles that Miles cares enough about, but it's like him just constantly creating such a black hole in himself that it just starts sucking in the entire rest of society and the world.
Like that everybody has to deal with it now because you can't be satisfied. Yeah, definitely. Hold on, real quick, sir. I wanted to. The one thing about rage though in Miles is Miles showed rage at the very end. I cried 2 times in the movie. At the very beginning with Gwen, and then at the end when Miles came back to talk to his mother, although unfortunately it wasn't his like the mother of his universe. And I think I talked about when I was talking to the Cornbread Brothers the other day, is the way that young black men have to manage like justifiable rage with dignity and appropriate emotional, regulation, etc. And like it was such a great performance, both by Shameik Moore as a voice actor, but also the animators capturing. Because I probably have told most people this, may or may not know. Like I was a teacher. I remember that. Then I worked in juvenile justice system, so I've worked constantly with young black men who are in trouble in some regard, and it's a specific posture that a lot of them take on when they are trying to control themselves, but they are facing the absurdity of like structural barriers to like their humanity. And so like it was a really, like, to me, one of the more powerful things from the movie was hearing him describe to his mother how she perfectly predicted what was going to happen and how he persevered anyway. So yeah,
it's an interesting thing that you mentioned that too, about like regulating rage and like having to do it, because that's also something that Aronach and I spoke about in our J.K. Rowling video that we did about like the Harry Potter nonsense. Without relitigating all of that stuff, one thing we talked about is like I had to do this like 3-hour video so that like at the end of the 3 hours, Aronach and I could both express this like, actually fuck J.K. Rowling. We had to go and explain all of it.
Can I read a thing?
Well, yeah, one second, just to finish this thought. Like to earn that rage, we had to like explain it all, because what will happen to trans women, and white trans women, I should say specifically too, because it gets complicated too across race lines as well for trans women of color, but for white trans women too, like our our femininity will be stripped away from us if we ever express anything that is like coded as masculine. So showing rage was like, that's just an element of your male privilege, your male socialization, these sort of like very like dog whistle turf phrases to like strip us of our sense of being seen as women and our humanity as well, and like having to earn that. So it's an interesting sort of connection. Yeah, sorry.
I was saying, Turb was waiting because I jumped in front of Turb. I didn't want to let him
Turb.
sit back too much
Damn,
longer.
that's grody. Why you do that to him like that?
Hey, thank you, King of Blacks. Yeah. But I want to say, like, as dark as all these structural I guess methods of power are, Miles's story is very much about hope. Right. Miles's story is about moving in a system that doesn't love you, but moving with integrity and moving like you deserve to be there, right? And that's not something that I guess everyone can I wanted to relate this to Spot, because Spot is a story about a white man's anger getting the best of him and releasing it on the anomaly he thinks did it, and not the scientist, not the billionaire corporation, not the science director, not any of those. But Spot's story is about I guess a white person delving into Western systems of power in order to, I guess, enact their anger on the anomaly of blackness of Miles, right? And like yeah, I'd say like the I lost my train of thought. I was sitting on it for too long.
You know what?
I wanted to
one thing too, and then Aaron, I'll just sorry. One thing too, and then Aaron, I'll let you go, but then and hopefully Turbo will also give you a chance to think of your thought too. I just something I just thought of when you were talking about this and like talking about like not talking about the like company or anything. I would be fascinated to see an interesting comparison. I don't know if anyone here has played the Miles Morales Spider-Man game and the story of that game. So just to give a quick recap of that game, and I would love to see an interesting comparison of how Miles and it should be mentioned, the Insomniac Spider-Man gets quoted in the movie and explicitly called out, like they run past and there's the Insomniac Spider-Man, which is the Peter Parker version of that Spider-Man. But there's a Miles in those games that gets his own spin-off game and is now in the second game. They're splitting up. But the story of the Miles Morales game, the spin-off of the Insomniac Spider game, is Miles gets to be Spider-Man while Peter Parker is away. And he discovers that there's this corporation called Roxxon that is going to like destroy the city with its like whatever nonsense unobtainium element that it's building. And then there is a friend of Miles who basically becomes kind of like a Hobie character in the sense of like, let's tear down the system. And she's also a person of color, but I forget her background. And Miles, it kind of reads to me very, very similar to like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where it's like Miles plays this like, okay, we do need to fight the corporations, but you're going too far. Let's do it like the less violent way. And it kind of has that more neoliberalist bent to his character. And so it'd be an interesting comparison to like that version of Miles, especially since it's quoted in this game or in this movie, as opposed to the Miles is presented in these movies and sort of like the different like radical takes on how they're presented.
Via Black Twitter, so take this with a grain of salt. I've seen a lot of neoliberalisms of Miles. He tends to be, according to my, so please, if you are a true spectacular, which Spider-Man is he? Is he Spectacular Spider-Man?
Which one? Who?
He was Ultimate Spider-Man because the original Ultimate Spider-Man died. That was Peter Parker in that universe, and then Miles took over. But I can't remember what he's referred to now.
I read through the series. Yeah, you first.
No, I just say either way. So if I'm open to being wrong, but I remember seeing that multiple times. That like Spider-Man in the comic, Miles is
also
often presented.
He's
the type to say something like, "I don't want to be Black Spider-Man. I just want to be Spider-Man," which has a lot of like. There's a lot of problems with that phrase under in most contexts.
And the movie teeters towards the comics teeters more towards structures of power upholding justice than anything else, and the movie kind of collapses that. And it's kind of wild how in the first movie the only canon events in the books is the number 42, right? Because they start directly from the comics, the Ultimate Comics of Miles drawing the 42, and then it goes to Miles going to the school, and then they completely diverge from the canon, right? And I think and they did that purposefully, because if they depicted the comic book version of Miles Morales, this would be a very different conversation, I promise you. Like, we would be carrying that for hours. Yeah.
Anyways, Aaron, I want you to
before we go way too far away from the couple of topics, I just wanted to say, because like, that scene where Miles is talking to Rio and he's doing that posture and his shoulders are sitting a certain way and is moving a certain way, and I've coached a lot of black boys between the age of like 11 and 19, and I was like same as you, Feek. I've seen that, and just that scene just hit me like a truck. Like, and then touching on the thing with Jessie, like Jessie and I have talked about this, and I have the script that I've been working on for a while about this game called Signalis, and like trans genocide shit, and and I have a bit in it where I talk about like because way late in the script I get angry, like actually let myself be angry, and I say, and you'll probably recall from my anger here because both myself and other trans women are not allowed to express anger. I have to earn it. Matrix over an hour of building to an expression of anger. Jessie and I discussed this after releasing the J.K. Rowling video where she built for hours to express anger for one sentence. You're murdering us, and I'm supposed to be nice and kind for you? And like that, I think, is something just marginalized people in general can relate to, because I think our emotions, I think everyone's emotions are kind of policed to some degree under white supremacy and patriarchy. Everyone, in different ways, in different degrees. But I think especially if you're marginalized, that there's a heightened level of that, because there's those presumptions about you that are made if you express anger, if you express frustration in a visible way. Yeah. And like I think it's interesting how that relates to these characters, because even when Miles is angry, rightfully angry, he's holding it all in,
To black boys, like anger, there's a weird relationship with anger. I'm losing I'm losing it. I'm like,
and we'll start wrapping up soon. So
I'm gonna jump off now so I can brew this coffee and move my dinner table to set up my set.
Absolutely.
I wanted to just say, one, just thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, all of you, but specifically Aaron for breaking down some of that coding that I knew I was aware of. But like, it's so funny, that first scene, I said to myself, this feels deeper than just a confrontation between mother and dad. And what are they trying to get at? But that's the dope thing about having a community with a variety of voices, is that you catch things that you wouldn't have caught based on your standpoint. Because somebody else had a perspective on it you didn't have. Shout out to everybody in the chat. And I think that's it. That's all I got. I don't know if there's any last things.
Well, everyone go follow Feek, because he's amazing. And if you're already following me, I don't know why you're not already following Feek, but you should be.
Quite likely. The new video Sunday, much lighter than usual. I'm getting back to I'm doing politics for at least 2 months.
That's probably a very healthy and safe move.
Gotta take a break. Peace and blessings, y'all.
Take care.
Thank you for being here.
Well, since he's heading out too, I also need to start wrapping up because I've had a long day as well. So why don't we go around and have everyone say some final thoughts? I want to start with Bellamy and give you more, because Bellamy.
I think Bellamy was helping their dog.
Oh, okay. Then we'll end with Bellamy, because I know Bellamy hasn't had as much of a chance to speak. So why don't we go around and have everyone just sort of if there's anything we haven't touched upon, sort of have final thoughts and final say, and we'll end with Bellamy and give her Bellamy, them the last word and things to say. So
I probably talked a little too much, so I apologize for
do not
taking
never
too much room. But
Aaron, just to be clear, your thoughts are always amazing and incredibly thoughtful. You are never talking too much. I adore your thoughts, so you're great. Do not apologize for that.
Okay. I got excited, and then I
don't want to take up too much space, especially in a conversation like this. You take up you take up as much space as you need to, because I adore you and adore your thoughts, and that goes for everyone here. You're all lovely and amazing, and you never take up too much space. You take up exactly as much space as you need to, because you are accepted here, and your thoughts are valuable and amazing, and I adore your excitement.
Thoughts are valuable!
All right, anyway, everyone's excitement.
Yeah,
Anyways, love y'all. Sorry for
just
praising.
To finish
publicly.
off, just to finish off my thing, I really think that, and I got bits and pieces of this. I think I got a much better understanding of it because of the conversation from the other day with the panel that the Fake organized, and then also just like chats with Bellamy and stuff and Turb. But I think that one of the things that I really value about Gwen as potential trans representation, and this thing, I'm tired that we need to like every trans character in a film has to be like, I am a trans. Like I do feel like it should be confirmed by the directors. Like that would give me the ease of just being like, yep, we're good. Like that's all I need, is just like one person who worked on the project being like, yes, this was intentional. Then everything else doesn't matter. Like
what I want from stuff like that is, I do not ever want a character to be like, I'm transgender. What I do want is things that are explicit, that you can't miss from being trans. And the way that the best example that I can give is like, if you just have on the mantelpiece a picture of the character younger or something like that, where they're more it doesn't have to be, this is just an example that I'm giving of like the character being like more mass presenting when they're younger. And then it's a way to like signal this character is 100% trans without it ever being like, hi, I'm trans. But that's just an example. And I know that could be getting complicated into like showing a trans person pre-transition. Like I'm just using it as a random example to like textually confirming without it being like marketable, like here's the moment where they're trans and here's the moment where they're not, sort of thing. Anyways, but
what I want to recommend people watch, if you want to understand why Gwen Stacy in this film is trans to a really intrinsic degree, I want everybody to go watch a film called B.I.T. It's a film about queer vampires in LA. It's fucking great.
With Nicole Maines,
really
right?
I can't remember.
Girl from Supergirl, right? I think so.
Probably.
Yeah,
I don't know actors.
The
The point is, the main character is trans. There is nothing in the film that is ever like, this is a trans. It's implied in all these little ways, and it's implied in ways that like the Gwen in this reminds me a lot of how she is presented in that. But if you read the description of the film, it's literally like a trans girl moves to like it, everything around it. And I think that's my one frustration, is just that like I'd like someone to confirm it. But the other thing that I think is really valuable about Gwen as a white trans woman in this film is that they very clearly are like, she is flawed and needs to learn. And I do think that I know Bellamy touched on this, but I think Bill said it perfectly the other day. Shout out Lil Bill on the other panel, but I just wanted to bring it up right at the end to make sure it got across. I'm not taking credit for this observation. I do think we should question why the film makes it where it's like, why can't white people learn without seeing, violence against black people? Like that's, and especially against, black men, and how that's unnecessary. And I do think that Lil Bill's observation there, and I just want to keep crediting, because I'm like, I don't want to, steal credit for that observation.
Little Bill's fantastic as well.
Yeah, because like again, I had elements of that when I was watching the film, and I noticed it, but I do think that Bill like nailed it with that. And I know that combo will be posted somewhere at some point. I can't remember when, but yeah, because I think we need more flawed, marginalized characters in media, which is why Spider-Verse is fucking great, because it's all flaws. Everybody's flawed. It's all flawed, marginalized
flaws all the way down
to some degree that are all working through their character arcs, and they get to grow and change. Because I think clean, let's call it like squeaky clean, they're just perfect beings type of representation isn't productive. Yeah, and as someone in chat, Abracadaverous just said in chat, black pain keeps being presented for white consumption.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And that's an issue, and I do think that that element of the writing should be questioned.
And I just want to talk for like the radical abolitionists that aren't here right now, like Lil Bill. I'm like, okay, Bellamy will be happy because I'm attacking Gwen right now. but specifically with our relationship to cops and our relationship to disenfranchisement, we experience it firsthand, and a lot of us know what it's like from very traumatic experiences, right? Like Gwen's experience is mirrored by the vast majority of Black people. I've literally had guns pulled on me. I had someone run up in my house, put a knife to my throat. I've had a lot of things happen to me for me to be so de-establishment, right? And I can empathize with Gwen, and I can say, okay, this was a violent event that happened, but it is saddening that a lot of y'all don't get the experience that we get and don't get why we feel the way we do, right? And it's a thing of survivor's guilt, and it's a thing that Miles is combating throughout this movie, right? Imagine like imagine you're living in a disenfranchised area, your brother or cousin gets into something, right? And now your house is a target, and you're living in high anxiety for your whole entire like time that you're staying there until you move out, if you can even move out, if you even have a job, if someone even lets you have a job, right? You're living with that anxiety, you're living with that inner turmoil. Someone could run in my house again at any moment with a knife, right? You're essentially living in a system that doesn't want you there. Like cops won't help you, you can't go out for other people, so what do, right? And a lot of people in the real world are suffering from situations like that. And this movie paints it very clear, paints out the nuances very clearly, right? And Miles is an anomaly, right? Miles isn't like the people around him. Miles has opportunity. But what happens when he doesn't have that opportunity, right? When limited opportunities can come, he could fall system to that same sense of like, okay, I have to protect myself, and I need to become the prowler for myself and my family, like a lot of people around me. And that's something I've seen with a lot of my cousins and even like siblings. So it's a very scary thing in reality, and it happens in actuality. I just want people to understand like why Black people are so mad right now. That's
one. I think also just as someone who's experienced a lot of violence and shit too. Like I definitely feel a frustration towards like other marginalized people when they don't seem to fucking get it because they clearly haven't had those lived experiences. And Turb and I have talked about a bunch of shit that we have experienced. You know, we've talked about it. So I want to be clear, I'm not saying it's the exact same or anything. Very much not saying that, but just like there is a frustration, I think, when dealing with people who haven't had to deal with it and whatever specific types of violence and things that it is. Because it's like,
well, it's like
these feelings, these responses are informed by a lived experience.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and also too, like especially white folks generally, but even like white queer folks having this like ability to like recognize the harm that things like police can cause to the queer community, the whole like no cops at Pride, but then also can like I was literally yesterday there was someone who sorry I can't remember who they were, but they're making a video about like queer people arguing like cops at Pride are good and it's a good thing to have cops, and sort of like this ability to deny that aspect of how cops uphold these power hierarchies very violently against marginalized people, but because of our whiteness can deny it at certain times when it's convenient for us, as opposed to like recognizing how cops also harm all of us and uphold these power structures. So something worth mentioning in terms of like queerness interacting with whiteness as well. So, and Bellamy, I wanted to sort of let you have the final word because you've been very, very kindly listening and sitting and being a badass just right there. So I wanted to give you the chance to. Oh, you're muted. You're muted. So.
I don't know about badass, but you know, I have been uncharacteristically quiet.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of people here, and a lot of people have a lot of valuable things to say.
Well, you also have valuable things to say, so I wanted to give you a chance to, as we wrap out, to say your piece if there's anything that you felt
I appreciate you. Want to say. I appreciate you. Well, I mean, I'm gonna echo a lot of what other people have already said, right? And especially what Aronach was saying about like. So my frustration with, you know, people like Gwen or people like Miguel, you know, marginalized folks who have like an experience of being othered and pushed out of a system, but then because of their skin, essentially, because of how they're treated, because of how they're viewed, are like become assimilationists into other systems. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, okay, well, the problem isn't, you know, systems. The problem isn't power. The problem is, okay, well, this specific thing was being shitty to me. So then I need to get it. We just need to do it better. That's what we need to do. We just need to do it better. And for people who have like a visible and like visible, unerasable marginalization, right? Like from birth, it is something that you can't. I mean, before birth. Honestly, if we're talking epigenetics, depending on who your mother is, know that, and I don't want to say no overall because this isn't true, right? Because it's one of the reasons why I did appreciate for all of my issues with I wish I knew her name, but you know, the Spider-Woman,
Jessica Drew.
Jessica Drew. Thank you. For all my issues with how Jessica Drew was written, I did appreciate that she sided with Miguel. And there's a shot, and Feek talked about it on the live the other day, but there's a shot toward the end of the movie where Jessica's sitting on her bike, right? And she sees all these people mobilizing, and then she sees, you know, Gwen doing her thing. She sees Miles doing his thing. She looks off to the side, and she's thinking to herself, like, am I fucking up? Like, like, hold on, maybe I need to think about this for a second, right? I very much appreciate that, even though, because you can see it in her actions, she knows that there's something up and she's trying to do something to help people, but at the same time, she's not really. It's a very like peculiar position to be, especially as like a black woman. It's a very peculiar position to be in, because if you're thinking about it, she's probably thinking about her child.
Yeah.
She's probably thinking about, how do I keep this child alive? How do I keep this? How do I keep that? So I very much appreciated that.
And it's an arc I hope it gets extrapolated in the next movie.
Yeah. It shows the flaws of marginalized people in dealing with their marginalization. It makes things make sense for why people do things. So I'm not uniquely angry with like Gwen. I'm not uniquely angry with Jessica. I'm not uniquely angry. No, I'm just saying I'm making a broader point, right? Because the point I'm trying to get at is like, I mean, it's media, right? These are representations of things that we see out in the world, and these are representations of how people behave. And I think more than anything, and I say this all the time, and it's literally in. I mean, Aronok's gonna know this. Aronok knows this really well. It runs through literally all of my communication, everything that I do. I say Aronok's gonna know this. Jessie knows this. Jessie named it. I like mirrors a lot. I like mirrors a lot, and I like showing people themselves, and I like them seeing, like, okay, I'm a white queer. What's in Gwen that's in me? I'm a black woman. What's in Jessica that's in me? I'm a black boy. What's in Miles? It's in me, and it gives you an opportunity to look at yourself and say, okay, like, what are my values, and is there a way for me to live up to them?
And what I will say too, and interesting on that note, just to react to this, like, and I'll say this because you've done this for me personally, in quite visibly in my masculinity video, but also behind the scenes when you read the script beforehand. Like, you're very good at like poking people and making people introspect on their ways they uphold the systems, and I very much appreciate you very much for that. And kind of resonating with that point, like some of the things that you are pointing out is like, here's my frustration with how Gwen is depicted, or things like that. I look at Gwen, and I'm actually resonating with her a lot because of the same mistakes and flaws that she made. I sit here as like a white trans woman being like, I see myself having made these same fuck ups, and it's like something that I hope I can talk about publicly so that other folks who might relate to me will not fall into the same trap, but also recognizing that this is a thing that that like in these depictions, there's a kernel of truth to like how people from these perspectives will make these flawed choices that can ultimately harm others. And so it's like,
I see myself all over Jessica. I see myself all over Jessica because I've been there.
And I seem like Gwen is probably one of the characters I relate to most. I've seen in the media in a while, for better and worse, very much on the worse end too. Like that is like, it reminds me a lot of my very flawed teen self, you know.
Me as well.
And I hope that they land the element in the next film of her really learning and actually like owning how much she fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and it's the problem I'm having with the like trying to discuss the film in general, because I've all these amazing thoughts, but it's also just, it feels like it's like Jessica. It's kind of hard to really judge Jessica because it feels like we're only seeing half the arc. I think we're seeing the beginning of like what will be like, I do not think that at the end of the next film, other than maybe Spot, any of the characters we're currently seeing as antagonists will be like bad people, because I don't think that the Spider-Verse films traffic in inherent evil or good. Like, I think they're very much about rejecting that morality system and rejecting that simplicity and rejecting the view of like people who do crime as evil and people who fight crime as good. Like, they're not accepting that. And I do think it is pretty wild to see a BLM sticker on a main character's backpack. Like, that's a pretty wild thing to see. So I think it's pretty wild to have heavy implications that a hero character that is presented as purely good by the film, if you know what you're looking for, kill the cop like Hobie. Like, that is a pretty wild thing. And again, I think it's as Feek said, it's like, it's set up all this great stuff. It could either be the greatest or the worst attempt at comedy just talking about this, completely depending on the second film. And I think that's, I guess, my conclusion about Across the Spider-Verse is it is an incredible first 2 acts of a 4-act structure.
Mm-hmm. We'll see how it lands the ship.
How will it land?
I'm nervous.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how it goes.
I'm nervous because I think there's like 1,000 pitfalls that and as you said, I think they've written themselves in corners in certain spots. Like, I think
I just hope we get to be in Hobie's world for a bit.
Oh,
I just want like
crap out of that.
like a good like 10 minutes
I
of
don't want to see Hobie's world at all. I don't want to see his world at all. Because I like him as disruption. I don't want to see where he fits in. In
but
fact,
he doesn't fit in. I don't think he will fit in his own world.
I hope we go to his world and he doesn't fit in there either.
If
we go to his world, I hope it's clear that he doesn't fit in there either.
I don't think he will. I think his world will be a lot of contrasting art styles. Is my guess, because he's built a collage, right? And so what I would guess is that
he's DIY. He's literally pulling shit off of the walls.
Yeah, exactly. So I think if we do go to Hobie's world, I think it's going to be one of those things where the system he fights, if we get to see it at all, I don't know if we will. I really doubt we will.
It'd be interesting if his world is like black and white.
You know, he has the guitar because in the comics, the governor put the symbiote on all the police officers. So then he goes to the guitar to get the symbiote off of the officers, like the sound waves. That's cool.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, no, like there's a lot of cool stuff they could do with Hobie. There's a lot of cool stuff they can do with all these characters. I'm interested to see if they have learned from criticisms around. She was in the first film. She pilots the mech.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about the what was it, anime inspired character? I forget.
The anime spider.
I know what you're talking about.
My brain is blanking on her name right now. I'm really bad at names.
Let's call her Mecha Spider, but I know that's incorrect. But we'll just call
her a lot of Penny Parker.
Thank you, chat.
I am curious if they'll try to do a better job of Penny, just because there's a lot of criticisms of Penny from various Asian critics. I'm not going to try to speak to like what they were saying. I think people should just try to look like Google it. You can probably find some good articles. Obviously, read critically, et cetera, et cetera. But I just remember that being a big conversation around that character in the first film. Like, I think the third film has the potential to be the greatest end of a series ever. You know,
or the worst,
or the worst. And I don't think there's any in between. I do not think it will be mediocre. I think it's.
It's either going to be extremely disappointing or really good.
What it means, though, is we will have to have this panel reassemble Across the Spider-Verse in a year's time. But I love you all and adore you all. And there's Turb again. So to wrap out, before we finish off, can everyone just quick go around, tell everyone again in the chat where people can find you and where people can subscribe to you, and then we will bid you all a wonderful weekend. So yeah, why don't we go around and start with Turb.
My laptop is dead and my phone's about to die, so I'm going to say this really quickly. My name's Turb. I make intersectional content and all that. I probably had like, well, Jessie is going to be an upcoming one and Bellamy's going to be an upcoming one, but I try to have as much intersectional conversations as I can. We'll trying to dissect structures of like topics that I find palpable or relatable in the month, and that's it. Yeah. Thank you all for having me on. Thank you so much.
Of course, Turb, love you. You'll be on many more times, I'm sure. I adore you. So, all right. Aronok, why don't you go? Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's kind of natural. Hey, I'm Aronok. I'm kind of the creative partner of Turb and Jessie for a lot of their projects. I do a billion different things. You'll see my name pop up in the credits of a lot of different essays, and just like my friend over here, Bellamy, we do all the shit that makes these spaces run behind the scenes. Y'all don't know what we do, and you won't know. The stage managers of Left 2.
I believe me, my channel and I know half of many other people's channels would not run without these two. So yes, very much.
And I have my own channel. I'm currently working on a deep dive on Undertale and analyzing all of it. And these two will be in it. A bunch of other people.
Having heard part of the script last night, it's very good. So
yeah. Bellamy, I mean, we had a long conversation about it, which like really informed, I think, the ending of it. So I guess I'll hand that off to Bellamy.
Well, my name's Bellamy. You can find me at Bellamy Raya here on YouTube, but that's going to change soon. I've got some stuff in the works that's going to be a lot different than most of the other stuff that you all see. Like I said, I like holding up mirrors. I like tugging on heartstrings. I like making people feel things and forcing you to think about yourself. So that's coming. And Aronok was kind enough to already do the background talk that I would do otherwise. So just you will hear and see me in things that you won't realize that you're going to hear and see me in.
Mm-hmm.
That happens very frequently.
Well, I will wrap out. Y'all, this is my channel, so you already all know me if you're here. So I will just reiterate, follow these two because they're amazing and I adore them.
Bellamy's the best. I was always going to build you up.
You are both the best, and I love you and adore you both because you are both freaking amazing. So I will end there. Go follow them. Go follow Turb. Go follow Feek. Go watch Spider-Verse. Or be like Hobie and find other ways to watch it that we support but cannot say publicly. But beyond all of that, love y'all and take care of y'all and have a wonderful weekend. And video next week on my channel, so be on the lookout for same time this week will be a video. And our Star Wars video next month that Aronok is
Star Wars video. Oh my god,
so
so much work.
I'll get to it all. All right, love everyone here.